Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to week 7, our final week of summer camp. Kickoff to back to school is our topic today, and if you can believe it, we are at week 7. I cannot believe it myself, but thanks to those of you who are joining us today. Let's get going because we've got a lot to cover today. As always, if you haven't met me yet, if you're tuning in for the first time, my name is Rachel Cruzel. I'm a Territory Sales Director here at Texthelp. I've got 10 years of experience working in higher ed, and I'm here today to chat about what is sort of to come and what we've been working on here at Texthelp over the last so many months. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get going. For those of you who have tuned in before, I'm sure you can recite these by memory, but you're all on mute right now. If you do want to speak, just give me a holler, or feel free to throw questions either in the chat box or in the questions area. I'll kind of monitor that as we go today and take those sort of as we come. And then I've also tried to build in some time towards the end for questions as well. As always, I'll get the recording of the webinar out to you as soon as I can once it's finished kind of doing its thing when it's done, and then also provide you with slide deck and then any resources that come with today. And there are no other resources, just the recording and the slide deck. So what are we going to cover today? Because we are so close to back to school, if you haven't already started already, I thought we would just take a couple minutes and kind of talk about what the landscape of higher ed might look like this year. Coming from working in that field for 10 years, I always am trying to figure out kind of what things might look like. And obviously this year was a curveball no one saw coming. From then, I'm going to just kind of recap some of the product updates that have gone on since the spring of 2020. Some of the things I'm going to talk about might be familiar if you've joined me every week. I've tried to kind of integrate those updates throughout, but it's just a good refresher for students who might have not connected with you much since they left campus in March, just to kind of remind them or know that this was new versus not. So if you're working with students, if they say, oh, I didn't know that, you'll know, this is why. We're going to talk about Read and Write and also EquatIO, but then I'm actually going to talk about a third product of ours just because it might start sort of coming your direction or you might start hearing about it over the next year. So I just want you to be aware of what it is and what it does, just kind of in the back of your head. I won't spend much time on it, but just want to make you all informed of what we've been busy here doing. Going to recap a few resources that are available to you just as you kind of get going for the year. And then kind of, I'm guessing what most people are here for, kind of what's to come with our products over the next so many months and years. Mostly months though. I've connected with our product managers and kind of asked them if there's anything I can kind of divulge. And so I do have a few things to share with you all today. So that being said, let's talk a little bit about what the landscape of higher ed is going to look like this year. So when I started thinking about this, the big kind of question mark that you see on the screen I felt was super appropriate, and I actually did a session for the AHEAD conference this summer where you also probably saw this slide and maybe the next image I'm going to throw up there. But I think for all of us, it's a lot of unknown. I feel like every time I look at the news, I look at Inside Higher Ed or the Chronicle, anything having to do with what's going on in higher ed, things are changing. I feel like rule books have gotten thrown out the window. If you're a football fan, the game plan and the playbook has gotten thrown out the window too. Things just keep changing so rapidly. And so I think this is going to be a year of lots of adapting, lots of flexibility, a lot of just kind of taking things as it comes. And for myself, someone who's very much a planner, it'll be an interesting year for sure for people like me. So what I have up on the screen here is a box, and this is something maybe many people have seen before. It's a square box with 4 different quadrants, and the 4 quadrants are things we don't know, things we know, things we don't know we know, and things we don't know we don't know. And I feel like right now a lot of us are probably living in this box of there are lots of things out there that we just don't know that we don't know yet. Again, this year is just going to be so interesting with what's to come in higher ed. Prediction is probably gone out the window for all of us. So that being said, there are a few things that I do know based on my experience, based on what I do here at Texthelp. First and foremost, the show's got to go on. The students are coming if they haven't already, whether that be in person, whether that be online, whether that be a hybrid. And because so much of what students are doing right now is technology based, ed tech solutions and supports are going to be key in those areas. And a lot of times those supports and ed tech solutions are going to be technology based. So if you weren't kind of up on tech, if you hadn't really embraced tech, buckle up, because I think you're going to just be inundated this year and really be pushed in the technology area if you're not already there already. Technology is going to be central right now. We had these small kind of incremental changes that have always kind of gone on every year in higher ed, but this has just kind of pushed us to go further faster than we'd ever thought possible. And one of the things I always tried to do when I worked in higher ed was to figure out where students are and meet them where they're at. And I think this is going to be key and more prevalent than ever this year. Our students are coming from so many varied places, so many different availabilities to resources, technologies. They're getting used to being online. And so I think that's going to be something that's really key, is honing in on what and where our students are and really being personalized and what we can provide to them as much as possible. From a Texthelp side of things, I want to let you know, just from my perspective as a sales director here, our innovation is going to continue and we're going to still be here for support. So know that whatever life kind of throws at you in regards to higher ed and work this year, we're going to be here for you. We're going to continue to take that feedback and do things with our products to make them better than ever for everyone. And then also know that our support isn't going away. So if you need something, be sure to reach out to us, because that's what we're here for. We want you and your students and your schools to be successful with our tools. So that's my little kind of 2 cents from what I'm hearing and seeing here, kind of from my role, and then also working in higher education as well. So as you go into this year, a few things to kind of think about. Just kind of ask yourself, as I'm sitting here reflecting on the 10 years that I spent at higher ed, and then kind of as someone who's sort of an outsider but works very closely still, I think there's sort of a handful of questions that would be beneficial to kind of think about as you look at this year, if you haven't already. Ask yourself, what do your students need to be successful? Again, how do you meet them where they're at? If you're working within a disability accessibility resource office, what do your students need for access, both kind of globally, but then again, individual student wise? What resources do students need to fully utilize the support tools? So if you are a campus that has Read&Write, if you are a campus that has EquatIO, what are the resources that students are going to need in order to understand how to use them, especially your first years? If they're new on campus and this is a whole new ball game in addition to the fact that they're online and they're not in person, what can you provide to them? Both maybe those students you work one-on-one with, but also if it's a global or domain license, what will students need kind of holistically as well? And then just thinking about too, what do your faculty need? Are these tools that faculty can integrate and be able to provide to students as a resource? When they talk about classes, when they talk about resources on campus, things like that. So just a little food for thought to get you thinking as you've either prepared for, either are kind of working through your first week this week or kind of coming up on that. I know Minnesota, some of our state colleges where I'm from started this week. Some of our privates, they start after Labor Day. So they're either kind of in the throes of things now, or they're kind of gearing up for that, which I'm sure a lot of you are. So I'm going to spend the next 25 to 30 minutes or so talking about these updates. A couple of them I'm actually going to pull out of the PowerPoint to show you. Some of them are things that you've already seen. So in those cases, I'll just refer you back to kind of the week that we talked about or went over, I showed you these things, just because I want to get through all this stuff today and make sure that we end on time. So that being said, where we've come from. In March, as we all know, things got kind of thrown out the window. That good old playbook got just tossed. And at Texthelp, we really stopped, took a look at our roadmap and said, we need to focus on online learning. And we made sure that a lot of our product development shifted to focus and support that initiative. And so things like, how do we support this transition as a company? How do we support online learning? How do we support online instruction? What do our customers need? These are the things that are constantly going through our heads. And so that really became the focus of the last 5-6 months or so of our development is, supporting this because this is what schools needed. So that being said, as always, just as a kind of reminder. We talked about this in week 1, but I always like to recap it. Your feedback drives our innovation. It drives our development. It drives what our updates are. We do things called sprints so that, every few weeks we have certain projects we work on and then we release them. So you're not going to see an update once a year, for example. You're going to see these little snippets coming out. And you do have access to all these updates if you're a customer of ours. Sometimes they're just automatic and they just happen in the background. Sometimes you get prompted to update. And when these updates happen, a lot of times they kind of start out in the Google environment, in Google Chrome, and then trickle down to the desktop. This doesn't always happen. Some things are platform specific, but know that sometimes our big rollouts happen, and we'll talk about that actually a little bit later today. And even if you don't necessarily see or hear about some of our feedbacks that come out or our updates that come out, sometimes they're things that you won't necessarily quote unquote see happening. They're kind of things in the background. As you know, if you have any type of an iPhone or iPad or Android device, sometimes when your apps need to update, it'll talk about bug fixes, and those are things that we have to do too here. So some of our work just ends up being making sure that our product is continuing to work without any type of issue for users and students. So even if you don't necessarily hear some big announcement from us, we're not sitting back on our laurels. We are constantly updating and developing our tools. So as a reminder, again, make sure you're sending that feedback in, especially over the next year, within both our desktop and also online, as well as on our website. There are areas to send feedback, so feel free to fill out that form anytime. I've linked the feedback form online. You can also reach out to your representative, and it does get trickled up to the people who make decisions. So know that your feedback is taken into consideration, and that is something that as a past customer, I can say absolutely is true. Just as a quick reminder, I have a screenshot on the form showing you where to send feedback in the Google form. It's just under kind of the options area, and then kind of Windows, Mac desktop, there's a tell us what you think area and kind of the about read and write area. So feel free, please send that into us, especially as you start seeing and hearing what goes on over the next year. All right, so let's actually talk about those updates, what's happened over the last 5-6 months or so. We'll start with read and write. For Microsoft users, we've done some tweaks within our system to make sure that there's a fewer number of times that you're needing to sign into the toolbar. So if you're using Read and Write for Google Chrome and you're an Office 365 or a Microsoft school, you might have felt like I was signing in a lot of different times and kind of re-authenticating the use of the toolbar. We've done some work on our side to make it so that there's much less of that. So if you've noticed like, I don't have to do this as often, that's been one of our updates. And then just a couple reminders here, Office 365 schools, Microsoft schools, you can use the Google Chrome version of our tool. Just because you're not a Google school doesn't mean you don't have access, you do. And there is Read and Write that does actually work within Office 365 Online. So if a student is typing a document, for example, in Word Online, that toolbar will pop up and support a student in that process. If you are, for example, giving a student a textbook through their OneDrive account online, they can open it up and have the PDF reader read that PDF within kind of the OneDrive. It opens up the PDF in another tab basically, and then you can read the book, highlight, do all of that same interaction. So know that that does work. Microsoft users, Office 365 schools, you've got that same similar access, and hopefully now it's easier than ever for you to get at our tools. And one of the big announcements that came out late June was our integration with Respondus. Read and Write for Windows, we spent a lot of time this spring working on creating a lockdown browser mode of Read and Write, which kind of allows you to have access to these sort of online lockdown testing browser systems in a way that we couldn't get at before. While we have not tested as a company ourselves every single other lockdown browser out on the market, it can be challenging for us to get demo accounts. Every school is different, the way they have it set up, what version, where they're using it, etc. What we're hearing is that there tends to be patterns of our tool working in other ones. So we've tested it, we make sure it works in Respondus right now. But we're hearing through the grapevine that HonorLock, for example, works. We're hearing from schools that Examity is working working, sort of without flaw. So I always tell people make sure to test it. But what we're seeing is this kind of pattern that things are starting to work. Again, we have not tested it because it's challenging on our end because every school setup is different. But if you're a school that has this and you're seeing adoption, try the tool and see if it works. And then just as a reminder, something that I feel like doesn't get said enough, especially for our community colleges, Read and Write does work with AccuPlacer as well. So if you're an AccuPlacer school, if you're doing any type of placement testing right now, you're going to be doing things on a rolling basis for either spring or another time, Read and Write does work with AccuPlacer as well. I'm going to pop out in just a minute when I kind of get done with the read-write updates and show you a couple of these just so you can see them. So this is one that I will show you in just a minute, so hang tight. The EPUB Reader. So the EPUB Reader was a huge release for us in March of 2020, and it was in response to the fact that we heard higher education talking about the fact that publishers were sending so many more EPUBs than PDF files. And so because of that, we rebuilt our EPUB Reader, made it really easy for students to use, and it really just is a plug and play. They just simply open your EPUB within the EPUB Reader. And what we're finding is there's so much continuity and similarity between the PDF reader that students are able to kind of pick up on it very quickly, very easily, without any sort of hiccups in that. So while the file format is different, the actual interface or what it looks like is so similar to the PDF reader that they've been using that they've been able to kind of jump on board and get a handle of that really quickly. Now, week 2 is when I actually showed the EPUB Reader, showed you kind of how it worked. So if you haven't seen this, if you want to review, head back to week 2's recording. As always, I will send out kind of that compilation document with all of the links to the slides and the resources and the recording, so you can head back and kind of find that in there. In that week, I did mention that there was rumored to be more of those annotation features built in at some point. I'm not sure where that is kind of on our roadmap, but there are a couple that aren't in the EPUB Reader that are in the PDF Reader. The highlighters are all in the EPUB Reader. It's more of kind of the shapes and the freehand drawing, things like that. So not sure if that's still on the roadmap or when it would get done, but you know, 2 months ago or so when we did that session during week 2, that was still kind of slated at some point to get done. Our PDF reader. This is another tool that has gone over a little bit of overhaul, and we're actually going to talk more about kind of long-term plans for our PDF reader in a little bit today. But for Read and Write in Google Chrome, we were actually able to add the screen masking feature. So before the Read and Write for Google Chrome toolbar, if you opened up a PDF online, the screen masking feature wasn't totally in there, and so now it is. So that same continuity for students is built in. So if they typically use screen masking in a browser, they've used it on a desktop, for example, they can just have it open within the PDF reader as well. It's there, it's a button just like everywhere else. For Read and Write for Windows, we actually did some tweaking in regards to our options and settings for the PDF reader. Right now, it will respond and kind of change any of the speech setting or adjustments that you do within the kind of general toolbar. So if you change the speed, for example, it will change it in the PDF reader. The different color that highlights when it's kind of dual color highlighting as you read. Having it read continuously either by word or by sentence. So those things used to be kind of changed in multiple places. It's kind of global change now in the entire PDF reader for the Windows area. And again, if you need a recap on how the PDF reader reads, what we talked about, strategies with it, that again is week 2 when we talked about reading and studying. Talk and Type, which is our dictation tool, and also word prediction, did get some tweaks and some updates over the course of the last several months because of the move to more content being online, being learned online, being created online, etc. And what we did was we did work with how these two tools work in something called content editable divs. And what it is basically is if there's a place online where you're adding text in that looks kind of like a text box, so think in like a learning management system, there's a discussion post area where maybe you would type in a response within emails, Outlook, Gmail, things like that. We did some tweaking so that our tools can be used in those kind of settings. Basically, it's kind of like an online text box. It's sort of the easiest quote unquote way to do it. This basically just gives you more functionality, students more functionality in places that someone would write or type content online. Just trying to really diversify where this works. So again, I mentioned things like discussion boards, assignments, quizzes, exams, emails. And if you want to know more about this, we did cover how Talk and Type, our dictation tool, works, and word prediction in week 3 when we were talking more about kind of that typing, writing process with our tools. So more use in more places for Talk and Type and dictation online. Again, because so much more content is online right now. Our Simplify tool, we did add some additional options. Simplify we talked about on week 2. It's located within the Google Chrome browser within the toolbar that works there. What it is it allows us to kind of strip out erroneous images and things like that from a website. It kind of brings it into a clean new tab and then allows the user to do things like change the line spacing, fonts, change the background color, things like that to just make it easier for someone who might have a visual disability, maybe someone who has ADHD, distractibility, learning disability, dyslexia. Sometimes things like line spacing can help those individuals with reading. And with that, we also did add the Discover tool. It was in beta earlier this year, and what it does is it kind of goes through when you turn it on, looks at the content of the reading and says, hey, this might be something that a student might need more information on, highlights that word and then allows the user to click on it, and it gets kind of a pop-up box of more information, basically. Kind of just gives some more of that background information that some students might find useful, either if it's a topic area that they're not super familiar with, or maybe for students who might be learning our language. If we have international students, EL students, they can just kind of get that additional information on top of like a dictionary. It provides that kind of additional context for students. We talked about this again on week 2. That's where I demoed it, but know that this has been added to and tweaked over the last few months when we rolled this out. So if you haven't tried it, we're seeing a lot of students using it right now, especially in higher ed when it comes to the online reading, especially if they're on websites, or I should say I've been talking to a lot of schools about it. So hopefully that's kind of getting down to students as a tool and a strategy to help them out right now. Our screenshot reader in Read&Write for Google Chrome underwent just a little bit of tweaking, but we did actually add in a pause, play, stop option within the screenshot reader. So before, if you were to screenshot read something within the screenshot reader, you would not be able to pause it or start it again. Basically, you'd have to just listen to it from start to stop and then replay it from the beginning again. We added this ability to be able to pause it and then start from where we paused it to be able to continue listening. So if you have a large group of text, you could read a sentence or two and then pause it and then, for example, take notes and then listen to it again. With that also came the ability for us to copy content to a clipboard. So students could then, for example, paste that content into another document. A question I get a lot is, hey, I'm a Windows user. Did this get updated in Windows? And it didn't, but within the screenshot reader on the desktop of the computer, you can use the pause and the stop tool in the toolbar to pause and then stop and play the screenshot reader within the Windows desktop version. So know that that's there for that way. And again, we talked about the screenshot reader during week 2 when we talked about reading. So if you need to kind of recap that, let me know, and I'll actually show this in just a minute. Last up for Read and Write, we did add in a data desk for Office 365 schools. If you were a Google school, you may have used Data Desk. It's essentially our admin analytics so that you can go in and kind of see what tools are being used, how often over kind of a course of a timeline, like over the last month, sort of what's been used. We added that in finally for Office 365 after being asked many times, but you're just signing with your Office 365 account. It's going to pull data just from Google Chrome and Office 365 online. It doesn't and isn't able to pull any data from a Windows or a Mac user's computer, because once that installer kind of gets on that computer, we can't get at it. So a lot of schools at, you know, renewal time or wanting to kind of give reports will say, well, how many students are using the tool? For those that are Google schools, you're able to pull what's gone on in Google Chrome. For users, for Office 365 schools, you're able to pull what's gone on in Office 365 online for Google Chrome, but not kind of if a student puts it on their desktop, because again, it's on their computer, we can't get access to it, okay? If you try to get at Data Desk, can't get access to it, reach out to your rep and they can work with you to get access to the tool. And we covered Data Desk in week 1. So if you need more information, this is completely new to you, head back to week 1 where we did talk about that. And there's links and information and descriptions all in that part, okay? Before we hop into EquatIO quick, I'm just going to show you the 2 quick things that we did for updates. I'm going to open Read&Write for Google Chrome or Read&Write for desktop quick to show you the Respondus integration. I can't actually show you what it looks like with Respondus because we don't have a Respondus account here because we're not a school, but I can go into the options and kind of show you what it would look like. What'll happen while this loads up, I'll kind of talk about it. When a student logs, has Read&Write open and they open up a lockdown browser, what'll happen is Read&Write will actually detect that that lockdown browser is going on. And what it'll do is it'll say, hey, student, we noticed that you are using a lockdown browser. Would you like to start this mode? And from that point, then the student can choose to do so. So what I've done here is I can also manually have this happen by going into the settings area, which is just our hamburger menu over on the far right side. Lockdown browser mode is right here. All you do is just click start. Again, it's going to say, hey, this is going to disable features. Are you sure you want to continue? Click yes, and then it literally just opens it up in lockdown browser mode. You have the screenshot reader to be able to read text, and then the screen masking tool as well. So it's going to take out a lot of those tools that schools, faculty would not want a student to have access to if they were taking a test. And then second up, I'm just going to show you that screenshot reader really fast for you. We've got our screenshot reader here. I'm going to click on that button. I'm going to go ahead and grab my text here. It's going to think about it. And as you can see, we have our play, our pause, and our stop buttons within screenshot reader, and then our copy button as well. So those will be 2 new things that you might not have seen yet. So let me look at our questions quick and see if there's any that I can answer at the moment. Jamie's wondering if have you been given any feedback from universities using Lockdown Browser with Lockdown Monitor? I'm curious if Read&Write could be used remotely for testing in an LMS Canvas if it's being monitored for a student. Jamie, I haven't heard anything about Lockdown Browser with Lockdown Monitor. I'm curious to know more though. So what I'll probably do is I'll reach out after this is over just to get some more information. I'll copy a rep on it just because I'm curious for my own understanding. Okay, looks like Robin has a couple questions. Robin says it would be helpful to have statistics about how many times the tools were downloaded and authenticated using the domain email. Maybe it would just be the authentication. Robin, you are not alone at all. I get schools all the time asking how many students are using, how do we count? Some of the solutions that I have for students, just because students can go to our website and can download the installer, is I do point some students or schools, I should say, to if you have some type of like software center, for example, you can have those installers kind of behind that. And what can happen then is it will then count how many downloads there are so that you have a better idea. Otherwise, I do know some other schools who might have like a landing page for this is Read&Write, this is what it does. If you're interested, here's a form to fill out, and it can be just really basic, like what's your name, what's your email, what's your platform you're going to use it on. Are you going to use like a Mac computer or Windows computer? And then at that point, it will actually send the student to the website to download the installer, for example. So you can kind of keep track that way. That being said, Robin, I will bring back your feedback about the authentication with the domain email just to see if there's, you know, any movement on that. As I said, we always take feedback into account. Jamie, are students able to use the Chrome extension with Lockdown Browser? Or do they have to use the Windows version? Jamie, right now we've only built out the Windows version. We have had a couple requests for Mac. From what I understand, it's a little complicated because with things like Respondus, our tool can't have kind of any routes to the internet, because if we have that, then students can get access to that data online. And because the Chrome extension is online, it makes it challenging, more so because it's what places like Respondus have kind of for their quote unquote rules for us to be able to be whitelisted to be able to use with their tools. But I'll bring your feedback to our team as well. And then Ellie, any feedback on using it with Proctorio? Ellie, no feedback as of yet. If you're a Proctorio school though and want to try the tool, I'd highly encourage you to download a trial of it or just kind of test it out. Again, every school looks so different and how their setups are. So we actually learn a lot from you guys, and that's how we found out about HonorLock and Examity being solutions that worked. So any insight or any Proctorio schools out there, if you've tried it, let us know how it works or not. But what we're hearing is kind of good news through the grapevine. So all right, let's talk about EquatIO for a couple minutes. Not as many updates to EquatIO, but I'll still show you a couple of them in the time we have. One of the big focuses this spring for EquatIO was these STEM tools, which have recently been released. First and foremost, Desmos, who does our graphing. If you're a math faculty, science faculty, you might have heard of Desmos before. We embedded their scientific calculator into the toolbar as well. This was a big one that some schools find really useful, but that's been added in. We also added in an interactive periodic table as well under the STEM tool area, and then also a molecular viewer. Much like I mentioned before, a lot of our updates start in kind of that Google Chrome area and then kind of trickle down to Windows. So if you're a Google Chrome user, you might have already seen these, and I'll actually take a minute to show you in just a minute what these look like. One of the other big things we did for EquatIO for Google Chrome was this copy as math button, and I'll show you this one as well. Both will take me just a minute. But what it does is when you make an equation in EquatIO in kind of that box of like the creator box, essentially, the entry box, over on the far right side, there's actually a copy button that you can copy the equation, and then literally you can take that equation and really paste it into anywhere. Why this is awesome is that it's no longer kind of makes you have to enter equations either into things like Google Docs, for example, or in Google Forms, or in Microsoft, for example. You can take that as it copies the equation to essentially your clipboard, and you can take it anywhere. And so what we're seeing a lot of is that there are teachers using this, faculty using this, and other ed tech tools out on the market. So if they want to do something like some type of a quizzing tool, for example, they can copy that content elsewhere. Okay, so I'll show you that. One of the other ones that I actually completely missed, even though I work for the company, is the fact that in G Suite, when we add alt text for our equations, we changed the way that these were added in. In the alt text box in the title area, we do actually have the descriptive text, but then it was requested by our users that we actually put the MathML in the descriptive area. This came out sometime in March, and so far we've gotten good feedback. Again, we've taken your consideration into account and did actually push this out. So that being said, hop out for just a minute. I'm going to show you those two things real quick. What I've got here is I've got my EquatIO toolbar here down at the bottom. Here's my STEM tools. The last kind of icon of our tools over here are STEM tools. It's got the little beaker with some type of fun little science experiment going on. Right in the middle is going to be our scientific calculator, our Desmos calculator. By clicking on it, it's going to activate it. It's going to pull it open. And then we do have our scientific calculator right here for student use. Next up, our periodic table. Again, it's interactive. I'm from Minnesota, so I'm going to selfishly MN choose 25 here, manganese, and it's going to, when I click on it, allow me to pull up information about it, kind of those key things that students might need to know, as well as a description. And then we're actually able to add it to the equation editor as well, for example. And what it's done, if you can see, I already had an equation in here. It did actually add in MN as my symbol. Last up is going to be our molecular viewer. So that's going to open up again, just like the other ones, kind of in the forefront. What I can do then is search for different elements. And as I type in, it's going to actually prompt me, what do you want to look at? Again, I'm going to choose that one because I'm from Minnesota, but then it does give you options to do things like change what you're looking at. You know, do you want the ball and stick model? Do you want the cross model? It's very faint line there. What I'll actually do is show you a different one and actually zoom in a little bit. It's tough to do just a little bit at a time. But as you can see, you've got that more complex ball and stick model. You can change it to things like the cross model as well, kind of whatever your students need. So some really useful tools for the chemistry, for example. And then last up I mentioned is that copy math as button. I've got my equation here that I've entered into my equation editor. And on the far side here, we've got this copy button. All I do is simply click on it and it's going to ask me, what version do you want to copy this as? Do you want to copy it as MathML? Do you want to copy it as HTML? Do you want to copy it as an image, a URL, a downloadable PNG? So again, it gives you as a user a lot of flexibility of where you put these equations later. Again, do you want to put it in another place that you have students commonly interact with, or places where you're creating content? We really just want to be able to diversify where we can use it and what ed tech tools. And that was one of our goals that I've heard from our product managers. We want students and users to be able to use this other places than just where the toolbar works and floats. All right, so those are our read-write and our Google read-write and EquatIO updates. I'm just for like 2 minutes going to talk about a tool called WriteQ. WriteQ is one of our newer tools in our portfolio. As I mentioned at the start, the reason I'm going to talk about it for just a minute is because you might start hearing about this tool in higher ed, and I just want you to know kind of what we've been up to and what it does, so that if it comes across your desks or emails, you know what it is. WriteQ is sort of a new tool. It's been kind of in our portfolio for a couple of years, but just know that we're going to kind of push and relaunch this tool much more kind of intently this fall. It's called WriteQ. That's how it's pronounced. But what it is essentially is it's a writing assessment and tracking tool. Think on your campus of people like writing your English courses, introductory or first year courses, writing centers, maybe ELL students as being the populations on campus who might benefit from this tool. It's a Google Chrome extension and also kind of a Microsoft Word add-on. Okay, let me break down what it does just real fast. What it does is it has two components. It has a student dashboard, and then it has kind of a teacher dashboard, and then kind of an admin piece as well, but I'm going to focus on the student teacher piece. For students, it's kind of like a Fitbit for writing. Our goal is to get students excited about writing, and by doing that, it kind of gives students this little essentially Fitbit on their Google Doc, for example, or within Microsoft. And what it does is it measures a student's writing burst, or kind of how many words in a row that they string together when they're typing. As students are writing a paper, it's going to give them some statistics, some information about the subject area, word clouds, and then there's also some badging built into kind of some of that gamification. So if you have students who kind of struggle with writing, getting them excited about writing, we're hoping that this might kind of help with that a little bit and provide some positive feedback. So many students come to higher education not liking writing, feeling inadequate when it comes to writing papers, and so this might be a tool that might kind of hook students in and get them excited about it. From the faculty side of things, students will get feedback from their faculty within their kind of dashboard area. And what some of this feedback looks like comes from kind of some analytics that we pull, and then also some interactive pieces that the faculty do. It provides some automatic grading of things like grammar and spell check, which kind of helps faculty decrease kind of that quantitative grading piece is kind of the best way to describe it, that spelling, that grammar, and allows them to focus instead on the qualitative, giving that kind of good quality feedback to really guide and help students. what our tool does, it gives you kind of a RIQ score, which talks about a student's writing sequence, the vocabulary maturity, what's that vocabulary level, and then also the diversity. Are they using kind of the same words in the same areas, or do they have a pretty wide variety of words that they're using? There's built-in rubrics or the ability to add in custom ones, and then score tracking and analysis. So keys to think about here, just if you start hearing about it, tools to kind of help students, tools to help faculty grade papers more effectively. I know that when I worked in higher education, one of the struggles we always ran into with English departments was having that timely feedback for students so that it would help propel them to want to write more. There would be semesters that students would get no feedback in any type of a timely fashion. And so that just prevented students from capitalizing and becoming better writers. So our tool will hopefully help with that process. So just wanted you to be aware of what it is. If we've got a couple minutes at the end, I'll hop in and actually show you what it looks like when we talk about kind of next steps, things like that. But just wanted you to hear about it. So if you see notification information, that's what it is. All right, let's talk quick about some resources for just a couple of minutes. This page may look familiar to you. It's a list of a bunch of resources. This came in week 1. It's a list of all of our different resources available to you. Don't forget about these this year. Don't forget to send students to these. Don't forget to use them yourself. Just as a recap, we do have a training portal that includes kind of courses, our certification, any resources, some videos, things like that. We also have a YouTube channel. So playlists, short feature videos, webinars, things like that are located on there. A really great resource for students to go to. Our educational blog, make sure to subscribe for any new posts. Usually we do some type of a back to school update. I feel like from working in the field for 10 years again, it would come across my desk every year. I'm not in charge of the blog, but watch for it. Hopefully something will come out, kind of giving you some updates and things to think about. And then obviously our tech support website, make sure to reach out to them if you're running into any kind of speed bumps along your way. It does come free with your license. Use them. They're a great team over there to help you out. If you're in my territory, if you're not, you can kind of shut your ears down for a second, but if you're in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, or Missouri, I did spend some time this summer pulling together a new onboarding resource document. If you didn't receive a copy of it and want a copy of it, let me know. It's a live document, which means I'm going to update it in real time so that when you come on board with us, you have a complete set of resources kind of at your fingertips. That's kind of broken down by category. Likewise, I'll send it out if you decide to renew with us each year, and each one is kind of tailored for what tools you might have with our company. I'm going to see what I can do on my end in regards to kind of constant communication. Not overwhelming, but as we go into kind of this new academic year, what are you guys needing from me? Are you guys needing like a monthly update, some types of news or development, things like that? I listened to kind of feedback I got from some schools in my territory in regards to this summer camp series. I'm going to continue to listen to higher ed and see what else I can provide given the fact that I am so connected to higher ed over the next year, see if there's different higher ed focused webinars. I know that through our 7 weeks together, I've gotten some ideas from you all. So watch for those to kind of come out over the next few months, etc. And then again, for sort of people in my territory, I've looked at potentially doing some kind of videos to kind of help you with onboarding, understanding tools, things like that. Sort of similar things to what we've covered on the webinar series, but just as videos, things like that. So if you're in my territory, kind of watch for communication. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to your rep if you're not one of my territory people. Let me see, I've got a couple questions. Who would be the Rachel in Florida? Deborah, I'll make sure I connect you with that person. And Robin, thanks for the compliment. I'm glad that this has been useful and helpful to you, focusing not just on the Windows platform. Awesome. Thank you for that feedback. I'm actually going to talk about feedback on this series, so hang tight just a couple minutes. But I appreciate the compliment, Robin, on that. So Two other quick resources, EquatIO Academy, even though it's not underlined, there is a live link in here. These are just EquatIO specific resources if you are an EquatIO user, want to explore it more. EquatIO Academy is new-ish, that's why I'm including it here. It's a web resource with a knowledge base of articles and videos and information. Go there. I know it's been a labor of love for our product manager, Louis, who's been here for just about a year. He's done a great job with it. So check it out if you haven't, if you're a current customer or are potentially looking at coming on with us. It's pretty incredible what he's done. And then Digital Math Mondays, it's a weekly YouTube chat. I actually got to be part of one a couple months ago, which was really fun. But we pick a topic and Louis gets to talk along with our product manager, one of our developers, about kind of what's to come. I know that the one I did with them was higher ed focused, so just kind of watch those. So if you're kind of techie, mathy, maybe faculty or instructional designers are interested, but it is something that's kind of fun to tune in for every week, or we do have them archived so you can always go back and take a peek. So I've got those linked there as well. All right, so let's talk about what's to come. Got about 10 minutes of stuff here, okay? Again, focus on Read, Write, and EquatIO, and I'll just mention something real quick about RIQ again, just because you're probably going to hear about it over the next year. All right, so Read and Write, what's to come? I reached out to our product managers. Kathleen is our product manager for Read and Write, and I said, Kathleen, I'm going to do this kind of back to school update. What can I tell people? And this is what she said that I could talk with you all about. So first and foremost, the talk and type feature, which is our dictation tool for Read and Write for Windows, is getting rebuilt. It's going to be in ReadWrite, for Windows 10. The dictation tool is going to be new and improved, and kind of the key thing here is that there's going to be a smoother user experience with that UX. There's not going to be any voice trading needed, which I know some people have given us some feedback on. The good thing is that kind of good thing, bad thing, I should say, is that you are going to have to be connected online to be able to use the tool. It's going to be way better though. But if for some reason a student can't access online, say they're at home without internet access, or they're somewhere without internet, they can still fall back on the original talk and type feature if they don't have internet. So it's not reliant on internet in that they'll still have access to a version of the tool, but the new one will require internet. When that's coming is kind of up in the air, maybe by the end of 2020. It's really going to depend on kind of what happens and how development goes, things like that. So watch for that over in the next 4 months or so, and kind of information about that to come out. Or you might just see it pop up in your Read Write for Windows toolbar. The biggie that I'm going to talk about for just a minute is around Read and Write for Google Chrome and the PDF reader. I mentioned earlier today that some of our things that we do kind of for development, you don't always see. And that's just to make sure that the tool is still usable, it works well with students, for users and students, and that's kind of what you might see with this one. What we're doing is we're actually going to have to rewrite our extension for Read and Write for Google Chrome and the PDF reader. Why we're doing that is because it's going to allow users to better use our tool in places like learning management systems, again, because of the move for online learning, and then also better use in third-party websites as well. So kind of the key to think about there is optimization and then diversification. That's kind of the best way that I can describe it as someone who is sitting, coming from higher ed and newbie kind of here based on what I've heard. We want to optimize the user experience within these places that students are commonly using our toolbar, and then also diversify and bring more places to the tool that can be used and it can interact with, basically. So those kind of are the two words that stuck in my head when I read what she said, optimization and diversification. For the PDF reader, that's also getting kind of a rebuild. It's going to be updated, and what that's hopefully going to do is allow us to have, first off, better usage in learning management systems. What that looks like, we're not entirely sure, or at least I've not been privy to know what that is. But in addition, we're hoping that with this, we're going to be able to actually increase the platforms and the usage of where the PDF tool can work. And that includes places like on the iPad. Right now, the iPad app only kind of focuses on the writing piece. We're hoping that with this PDF reader update, things like the iPad can have access and can read PDFs, things like that. This is a big project. There's no timeline on completion. And so because of that, it might be a while before you hear anything, but just know that we are busily working on this behind the scenes, again, to make the tool be able to be used in more places. That's one of our keys right now. All right, EquatIO, let's talk about this quick. Louis, our product manager, I asked him the same question. He said, make sure to tell people that we added in 235 different physics formulas to EquatIO in Google Chrome. He actually took the link that's in the slide deck, took those all, added those in. They're now in there so that people can use it. They can pull it with the word prediction, the formula prediction option. So if you want to kind of take a peek, want to send this over to your physics faculty, feel free to send the link, but this is what's been put in. If there's ever any that are missing, as always, send feedback and we'll work to get those added in at some point. So know that those came for Google Chrome as of recently. When Louis and I talked late last week, he actually gave me an update and said, you know, Rachel, I'm not really sure when this is going to come out, hopefully soon. There's some EquatIO updates for desktop. And in the time it took him to email me and for me to present today, we actually did have that update come out. So this slide actually in some ways should have been under what has happened, but it was so close to it being released that I thought I'll just leave it in sort of what's to come. The STEM tools were supposed to come to desktop, but they have been released to the desktop. So again, that Desmo scientific calculator, that periodic table, the molecular viewer, all of that should have been released Thursday or Friday of last week. So if you haven't seen it, it is available there now. We also have the ability to insert equations into PowerPoint. That's only in Windows for now. And then also those physics formulas have either been added in or will be added in. So, you know, I mentioned earlier today that those kind of updates come to Google Chrome version first and then trickle down to the desktop. They have reached the desktop or are in process of reaching the desktop. So know that that is going on for those, okay? For the PowerPoint integration, in order for that to work, on screen here I have just a picture of the desktop options, and in it you'll just want to be able to turn on kind of this insert math as word equation option and save it in order for it to be used correctly, okay? Let me see. Marnie is asking, will the Mac version be called PDF Reader or PDF Allowed? Marnie, I'm not exactly sure, to be honest. I'm not privy to that. I can see what I can dig up, but I might actually not know exactly what that looks like. And then they also ask, will there be screen masking that actually blocks out the top and the bottom of the screen in the Windows and the Mac version? Again, Marnie, not so sure about that, but what I can do is I can actually pull all the questions and check with our product manager, see if there's any information on that, and try to get you, or your rep can get you some answers. So all the ins and the outs of updates, I don't always know about, especially these ones. They keep things kind of pretty under lock and key from us until we kind of have things ready to go. So that's all I know, but I can see what I can dig up. So just again, touching on RIQ, what I just want to give you guys a heads up on, again, with some of the kind of information, is that if you're interested ever in trying RIQ, we will actually be doing pilots starting in the next couple weeks. So if you're interested in trying the tool with students, if you have a faculty that might benefit from this, know that we are going to be able to do 30-day trials. If you'd stumbled along the tool before, there wasn't a way to do that. There is now, though. So know that that is kind of down the road in the near future for schools who might be interested in that. So that being said, we've got about 7 minutes left. I don't have much left. We've had questions kind of throughout. So what I'm going to do just real quick is just show you what RIQ looks like just real fast so that you kind of have in your head what it looks like. And then from there, just a couple little closing thoughts. I've got a Google Doc here on the screen. Down here in the corner right here, I've got my little RIQ meter. This is what kind of looks like a Fitbit, like I mentioned. And then as I type, it's going to kind of have these writing bursts. And I struggle with typing and writing at the same time, so I'm just going to write nonsense. But as you can see, it's going to tell me how many words I typed kind of without stopping in 2 seconds, basically, with a 2-second break, I should say. And then it's going to kind of tell me what my best burst is, my total number of bursts, how many keywords I have, things like that. Okay. I can at any time actually expand this out to make it bigger on the side. It's going to give me some more information. It's going to give me a subject area and then kind of a word cloud as well. And then from a faculty side, I can actually go in here and change it to say I'm a teacher. What it's going to do is it's going to do some of that automatic grammar, spell checking automatically in here. So it would kind of underline things. So if I had more content, it would do that. But then what we can actually do is choose a grade, for example. So maybe it's an undergraduate, graduate, or college level writing. Maybe it's undergraduate. There's some built-in rubrics here, or with kind of the version that you would pay for, you can actually add in your own rubric. So maybe this is narrative. It's going to give me how many words I've typed, the vocabulary age, how much time has been spent on the task, the accuracy, any spelling, punctuation errors, things like that, and then be able to actually go in here and actually grade a student and do things like adding in feedback as well. So that's kind of what this looks like, and then a student would have access to any of that. So that's kind of your quick RIQ overview, just so that you're aware of what it is if, again, those emails come across your desk. So we've got about 4 minutes left. I'm going to do some kind of wrap up few things. If you have questions, throw them in the chat, throw them in the questions while I kind of go through our kind of closing thoughts, our wrap up for the summer camp. Couple ideas to carry you forward. I always have these just to kind of get you thinking. But first and foremost, based on what I said today, are there any students you're going to have to kind of give a heads up about this? You know, students might have mentioned things last year, and seeing this prompts you and says, oh, I need to let students know about this. Hey, this update, you know, I didn't realize they had a new EPUB reader, and we've got tons of EPUBs coming out, for example. You know, are there things that you might need to send a quick email out to students about? Are there any students who might benefit from this tool who don't already know about it? For example, students in your office that you're working with, maybe there's certain departments on campus, you know, like student support. We talked a little bit about implementation last week. You know, if you've got a domain license, who else might know, especially now with so many schools going online, either hybrid or 100% high flex, who else can benefit? Who else can know? Again, if we're here for students, we're meeting them where they're at. Who else can use this and just feel like they're doing that much better this year? And then last up, what do I need to do over the next year to ensure my students are as successful as possible with the tool? So if you're kind of responsible for a cohort of the student body, you know, your disability resources, your academic support, you know, what are some things that you might have to provide to students? Is it getting them kind of refresher videos out? Is it getting them an updated user guide? What about your new students coming in? What do they need? So just kind of thinking about that, you know, what based on this last 7 weeks of summer, actually it was kind of 10 or 11 that we've spent together, what do my students need in order to be as successful with the tool as possible? So instead of a kind of what's to come for next week, because this is our last time together, my last thing that I please ask of you is I've pulled together a survey. I do want to hear from you. I want to hear what went well this summer, what didn't go so well, what you liked, what you didn't like. I always joke with my customers and my accounts that I talk to, like, I want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. I want to know it all so that I can address it, so I can support you, and so we can potentially tweak things. I'm hoping that it's quick and easy. It should take you less than 5 minutes to do. But in there, I'm just asking for feedback about that, and then what else we can do to support you all, what you're needing as higher ed customers, things like that, just to kind of help me sort of get a handle on how I can support you, especially those on my territory, since I'm a newbie here at Texthelp. So I just want to thank all of you who joined in for any amount of summer, anyone who has joined for a recording. This has been really fun for me to be able to do this over the last 7, 8, 9 weeks, 7 sessions with our break weeks. This truly has been something super fun for me to do, to be able to be really intentional and intensive with you all to be able to make sure that you've got the information you need. So thank you for taking time out of your summer. As always, reach out if you have questions. I'll get you hooked up with your rep. If you don't know who that person is, I'll make sure the person who asked about Florida, I'll get you connected. Anyone else who had questions that I wasn't able to answer, I'll see what I can do. But thank you, thank you. I'm not seeing any questions or chats come in, but I'll stick around as always if you have questions, things like that. Otherwise, best of luck with this academic year. Hang in there. Being there for your students, I'm sure as you all will be, will just be a ray of light for them as we move through these uncharted waters. So thanks, take care, and good luck.